Can you all hear me okay? I'm going to use my football voice. All right, ladies and gents, we're ready to start. Thank you so very much. And you say you're ready? Okay. All right. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good Wednesday morning. My name is Melanie Campbell. I am the president and CEO of the National Coalition on Black Civic Participation and convener of the Black Women's Roundtable. Welcome to our fourth Black Women and Allies Call to Action for voting rights on Capitol Hill today. And in addition, we also are focused on reproductive justice, reproductive rights, because truly voting rights equals reproductive rights and justice. I want to thank my co-convener of this Black Women and Allies group, Sister Janice Mathis, Executive Director of the National Council of Negro Women, and lift up Dr. Janetta Betch-Cole, who is the chair and president, who is a little under the weather. So we lift her up in prayer to have swift healing. We are going to shift the program a bit because we are delighted that we have Congresswoman Terry Sewell from the great state of Alabama, 7th District. Selma, Alabama is in there. So nothing but a blessing to have. And she also serves in many capacities. One of them is Chief Deputy Whip for the 117th Congress, who will bring us opening remarks, and then we will follow the program as outlined. Thank you, Congresswoman.
Well, hello, everybody. I'm Congresswoman Terry Sewell, and I represent the great state of Alabama. The civil rights cities of Birmingham, Montgomery, and my hometown of Selma, Alabama. I am here on the foot of the Supreme Court with Melanie and Black women, groups, and allies all across this nation to say we want voting rights, we want reproductive rights, and we want it now. Yes. Thank you, Melanie, for convening us together. Congress, we have to demand that Congress pass federal legislation to protect the right to vote and the right to choose. Yes. Right now, we're at a critical juncture in our fight for justice. As state after state passes laws to restrict the right to vote and restrict reproductive rights, it's clear our democracy and our bodies are on attack. At the same time, we're also fighting against a Supreme Court that is hell-bent on destroying Roe v. Wade, as well as our nation's most consequential voting rights legislation, the Voting Rights Act of 1965. For me, the fight for voting rights is very personal. Growing up in Selma, Alabama, no one had to tell me about Amelia Boynton Robinson. No one had to tell me about the foot soldiers that fought for justice and gave themselves, their blood, sweat, and tears, and many died for the right to vote. Old battles have become new again. Surely we thought that our mothers had already fought for reproductive rights and won. Yes. Surely we thought that the foot soldiers had fought for the right of every American to vote and won. But we know old battles have become new again. We see over 400 laws just this year being introduced in state legislatures across this nation, trying to restrict the right to vote. And we say no. We say on the foot of the Supreme Court, no, hell no, we're not going back. Right. We are fighting for voting rights and reproductive rights, and we're fighting hard. I am honored every day to represent Selma, Birmingham, and Montgomery in Congress. But nothing is more important to my district and to this nation than that we make sure that the Voting Rights Act of 1965 is in full force and effect. We need the full protections of voting rights, especially now that we have redistricting coming around the bend. And we have to demand that Congress and the Senate must act. You know, just a month ago, I stood on the foot of the Edmund Pettus Bridge in my hometown to introduce H.R. 4, the John Robert Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. And 1 week later, the House of Representatives passed the H.R. 4, H.R. 4. And they did so at 219 to 212. Now it's up to the Senate to act. And we tell our senators we want the VRA full protections back now. H.R. 4 now. What do we want? H.R. 4. What do we want? Well, when do we want it? Now. What do we want? H.R. 4. When do we want it? Now. And And we want to make sure that that archaic filibuster is gone away with. And we want Democrats to ensure our voting rights once again. So I want to say in closing that black women and our allies have always been in the forefront for the rights of our people, women, of our communities, of African Americans, and we're doing so now, led ably by Melanie Campbell and so many others. We want to make sure that America understands that we're not going to rest. We're going to be tireless in this effort, just like our foremothers and forefathers were. And we know that when we demand justice, reproductive justice, voting rights justice, that we can win if we band together. So I want to say in closing, we're coming for you, senators. We want to make sure that you know how important it is that we get our voting rights. And I want to say to the Supreme Court, we're coming for you. We're going to demand reproductive justice and voting rights justice, because we know that getting into good trouble, necessary trouble, is what we have to do. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Congresswoman Sewell, for always, always, always getting in good trouble. And we thank you and know we're blessed to have you in your leadership. So exactly 2 months ago, at our first Black Women and Allies Call to Action for Voting Rights Speak Out, on July 15th, as a matter of fact, we made a commitment that Black women and allies will show up on Capitol Hill until the House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate pass federal voting rights reform, where the House has done its job by passing the For the People Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Restoration Act. We know that there's now a compromise bill, they call it, on the Hill. Many of us are looking at that, and we'll come to you later on once we decide if this bill is strong enough to meet the challenge of the day about protecting our voting rights. So it's up to the U.S. Senate to get it done. But today we are gathered in unity in front of the Supreme Court of the United States to also shine a light on the fact that this body has not done its job to protect our voting rights and our reproductive rights. As we stand here on the steps of the highest court in the land, another challenge is faced upon us. We are seeing yet another attack on our constitutional rights taking place in states, and that is an attack on our reproductive rights as women, specifically the state of Texas. This law, passed by the Texas state legislature and signed by the governor, denies women our constitutional right to choose and control our own bodies. The Supreme Court of our land, which is supposed to be a free land, they say, has chosen to let the Texas law that is unconstitutional because of Roe versus Wade take effect. Now more than ever, our voices, women's voices, men's voices, LGBTQ voices, must come together to be heard, and we demand respect, not only for the women of Texas, but women all across this nation who are demanding that you respect our wombs and get your hands off our reproductive rights. And indeed, we demand reproductive justice. We also know that we cannot protect our reproductive rights without our voting rights being protected. As of today, over 18 states have already passed hyper-partisan voter suppression laws that have restricted voting access for over 56 million people that cast their votes in the historic 2020 election that elected the first woman, first Black and South Asian woman to serve as Vice President of the United States, Vice President Kamala Harris. So I think there's some people who just mad. But we can get madder. So what did those who don't want to see women own our political power? We know that 18 state legislators that passed that in a very short time since November 2020, Imagine what they can do in a short period of time, because they're not stopping at Texas to block our reproductive rights. It is not an accident that we stand here at the Supreme Court, as I said. Historically, when our laws have failed to protect us, we have to rely on our legislative bodies to correct what these people back here won't do, and what we demand that these people over here do their jobs for the American people. For black people in this country, we have always had to rely on federal protections to preserve our rights. And that's why we will keep pushing. We will keep agitating. We will keep participating in civil disobedience. We'll go to jail if we have to. We'll shine a light on injustice wherever it shows itself. We will keep showing up on Capitol Hill, at the White House, in the states, to gain and protect our civil rights, our voting rights, and our women's rights as Americans. And we will keep building coalitions led by black women, women of color, and other allies to advance justice for all. The women you see behind me and Janice and all of us, these are some bad sisters. Bad sisters. We are black, white, LGBTQ+, Latinx, Asian, Native American, and some good men recognizing that women's right to choose and our democracy are both at risk. Lastly, John Lewis, a civil rights icon who dedicated his life to justice for all people, said, quote, "You must be bold, brave, and courageous and find a way to get in the way. We will continue to get in the way. We will continue to get in good trouble until the U.S. Senate passes the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act and takes action to protect a woman's right to control her own body." So, ladies and gents, repeat after me. No justice! No justice! Protect our voting rights now! Protect our voting rights now! Protect our reproductive rights now! Thank you. Peace and power. So it is now my distinct pleasure to introduce my sister in the movement for justice, Sister Janice Mathis, the National Executive Director for the National Council of Negro Women. Following Janice, we will hear from our other co-conveners for the day, Fatima Goss Graves, National President and CEO of the National Women's Law Center Action Fund, Jordan Brooks, Executive Director, United States of Women, Bishop Leah Daughtry, who wears many, many hats, but today she's wearing the hat of founder and co-convener of Power Rising, in that order. Thank you. One quick logistics thing. Did somebody say they need to put the mic or something up here? So we'll keep going. Okay. They can hear you in the
Good morning. Thank you, Melanie Campbell, for your leadership, for your allyship, and for organizing this Speak Out today. I am Janice Mathis with the National Council of Negro Women, and I wasn't quite sure how I wanted to approach this opportunity today. But I looked over and I saw that sister's shirt. It says, "This is what a feminist looks like." Ladies and gentlemen, this is what democracy looks like. We're standing in front of the citadel of democracy. What does it mean to be an American? It means majority rule, one person, one vote, due process, equal protection under the law. That's what they taught me in law school. But they left out one element of that. We have to agitate. We get the kind of government that we deserve. We deserve reproductive freedom, but we won't get it if we don't demand it. We deserve the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, but we won't get it if we don't pressure. They're not going to do any more than we require them to do. And so to these allies, I saw Ellie Smil somewhere here today. 40 years ago, I was in law school. I was marching for ERA then. I thought we would solve that problem so you young sisters wouldn't have to deal with this. But now I realize, just like my mother In 1948, a brand new graduate of North Carolina A&T defied South Carolina and was one of the first to vote after 72 years of blacks being denied the right to vote. The most precious thing she left me was a faded newspaper clipping of a black gal from North Carolina A&T daring to vote in 1948, 72 years after the Tilden-Hayes Compromise. This struggle doesn't end. It may not end in your lifetimes. It may not end in mine. It may not end in these next generation sisters. But you know what? We're not going to give up the fight, because look at us. We are the majority. If you want voting rights, we need allies. If you want reproductive rights, sisters, it's going to take all of us, because guess what? There's 9 of them up there. There are 435 of them over there and 100 senators, but we are the majority in this country. If you ask about any issue, ask the American people, what do they feel about the environment? What do they feel about choice? What do they feel about reasonable gun control? What do they feel about voting rights? We all on the same side. But we got a group of folk who think they don't have to listen to us, and thanks to Melanie and all of you who are here today, they're going to hear us, and they're going to keep hearing from us until we get what we deserve as Americans. That's simply what it's all about. I thank you for the opportunity. I could go on and on, but I know we got a lot of speakers today, and I'm so grateful to each and every one of you for being here.
Good morning. We're going to take a minute to work out tech and see if that gets us where we need to be. Maybe we should do a chant, yeah? While we're doing the tech, let's do a chant.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
We could go with, when democracy is under attack, what do you do?
Fight back.
When democracy is under attack, what do you do?
Stand up, fight back.
When democracy is under attack, what do you do?
Stand up, fight back.
What do you do?
Stand up, fight back.
What do you do?
Stand up, fight back.
Where do you do it?
Here. Over there. And over here.
Okay. Good morning. I'm Fatima Goss-Graves, president of the National Women's Law Center Action Fund, and you know, my soul is filled following the leadership of Melanie Campbell and other black women who know when to convene and how to convene. And today we are here to demand the freedom to vote and demand the freedom to control our lives and to control our futures. And we're here to say that voting rights is reproductive rights. And if that hasn't been clear, watching what's been happening in the states and in Texas in particular, it is the same politicians that are trying to throw us back into outdated sexist roles, that are also trying to recreate racist voting restrictions. These aren't different fights in different places. This is the same fight. It's the same politicians that believe there will be no accountability at the ballot box that has emboldened them to pass such outrageous and extreme and unpopular restrictions on abortion care like SB 8, Texas's most recent abortion ban. And with such an unprecedented campaign to force our country backwards, to force our country decades and decades backwards, Congress has no choice but to take immediate, swift, and fast action to defend our access to abortion and our access to the ballot. Our greatest shield against these sorts of outrageous attacks is to have a healthy, participatory democracy. So we must ensure that everyone in this country has access to the ballot, that everyone in this country has an equal say as to who their elected officials are, that everyone has an equal ability to register to vote, to cast a ballot, and to have those ballots counted fairly. And that's why we know Congress must pass the John Lewis Act. The manipulation of our basic institutions, the gerrymandering of state districts, the systemic voter suppression, the politicization of the Supreme Court, no matter what we've been hearing justices say in recent days, that has gotten us to where we are today. The constitutional right to abortion has been effectively eliminated in the state of Texas, and let me be clear, it is hanging by a thread in the rest of this country. So today we find ourselves in a dangerous, on-purpose created public health crisis. And when it comes to abortion access in this country, that is what we are talking about. We are talking about a public health crisis. There have been more than 500 restrictions on abortion care in the last decade and 90 in this year alone. We must work toward a different future where our democratic systems in this country actually protect our rights, our dignities, our freedoms, our autonomy, and our ability to be equal in this country. We know that all of our liberty is bound up together, and that the fights to protect voting rights and abortion, these are fights that go to the core of who we are and who we will be as a nation. So Congress must act now to defend our access to abortion and our access to the vote. Thank you.
Chip, chip, chip. Hey, chip, chip, chip. Chip. Chip, chip. 1, 2.
Ooh. Oh, hello. Hi, everyone. I'm Jordan Brooks. I'm the Executive Director of the United States of Women, and I am so incredibly honored to be with all of you today. So many friends and partners that I was just saying I haven't seen in person in so long. It's really lovely to be here with all of you. And I'm so incredibly grateful to the Black Women and Allies community, and to Melanie, and to Janice, and to Fatima, and to so many others for all of your amazing work every day, and for bringing us all together to show how deeply, deeply connected all of our fights are. For the 4 years of the Trump administration, we all banded together across communities to fight against the relentless attacks that affected all of us. And today we're here to do that again, the fights for voting rights and abortion and reproductive health care access. The United States of Women believes that every issue is a gender issue, and voting rights are central to that. Without equal access to the vote, we cannot protect reproductive freedom and abortion access. Without the universal right to vote, there's no moving forward towards a more equitable country. There is no progress on issues from immigration reform to paid family leave to the minimum wage. Every issue is a voting issue, and every issue is a gender issue. And then we know that when all women vote and have access to the vote, we have a much better chance of building equitable communities. Our friends in the voting rights movement, the incredible Black women leaders that are here today and all across states and cities around this country, are fighting right here in Washington every day. As Melanie said, they've been here every day, but also in every state across this nation to ensure equal access to the vote. And the preservation of our democracy, our very right to vote, is inextricably linked to our reproductive freedom. This is all of our fight. Every single person who cares about gender justice should care about voting rights. I think about the women in Texas who today, as Fatima said, effectively cannot get an abortion, and many of whom I know will have a harder time voting the next time they try to do so. And we know this is affecting women of color the most. These are all of our fights. And today, we are here to call on the Senate to do something about it. Pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. Protect abortion access and reproductive freedom. And today, And every day, the United States of Women and the gender justice community is standing with our partners, our allies, our sisters in the movement, and calling for the Senate to step up and protect the right to vote for every American, as well as the right to reproductive freedom. Thank you.
No justice. No peace. No justice. No peace. It is my pleasure again to introduce our sister who will give us some serious insight, because she brings not only her political power, but she brings her Jesus power for those of us who are Jesus folks. She brings her spiritual power with her, and she brings her power as a woman. And that's always, it's my honor, and my sister Janice as well, our honor to introduce again Bishop Leah Daughtry. Thank you, Leah. Good morning, family. And to Sister Melanie and Sister Janice and all who have gathered here as part of this coalition, we thank you for your diligence and your commitment in bringing us together. My name is Leah Daughtry, and I am the co-convener of Power Rising. I am also the national minister of the House of the Lord Churches. And I am the fifth great granddaughter of Eliza Burke, who was born in 1789 in what would become Savannah, Georgia. Through the generations of my family who were enslaved, 5 generations, they had no choice about where they would live, where they would go, less more thinking about the right to vote. I am the first generation in my family to be born with the right to vote. I never thought that I would have to fight again to preserve what my ancestors did not have, what my ancestors fought, lived, died, and prayed for. And yet here we are today. I look at my nephews and wonder if they will have the free, full, and fair right to vote. Will they be able to go to the ballot and cast their votes for the candidate of their choice? Why are we here today? We're here because, and it cannot be overstated, democracy is at stake. We cannot call ourselves a democracy if all the people cannot vote. The very essence of our democracy is that the people have a right to make decisions about the issues that affect their lives. And yet here in 2021, we are back to basics. We're back to the idea that we have to debate whether the people can make decisions about their lives. Why are we here? We're here, as John Lewis would say, to get in the way. We're here to declare that we are not going to go back to what our ancestors had to fight for. And when we say ancestors, we think 1,000 years ago. I'm talking about the work that Ellie Smeel did. I'm talking about coat hangers. I'm talking about in the closet. I'm talking about things not so long ago that we thought we had fought and won and were done with those battles. But as Coretta Scott King says, reminds us even all these years later, freedom is never really won. It is fought and won in every generation. So we're here, as John Lewis says, to get in the way. We're here to get in the way of those whose naked thirst for power, for personal power, has gotten in the way and outstripped the right of the people and the power of the people who sent them to office in the first place. We're here to get in the way of those who want to narrowly define freedoms to carrying guns and wearing masks. When you talk about freedom of choice, freedom of your body, freedom to vote, somehow freedom has a different definition. We're here to get in the way of those who would divide us by issue, who want to separate our coalition by reproductive rights and immigrant rights and environmental rights. It's all one right. It's our right to pursue our version of the American dream based on our own choices, based on our own freedom. We are here to remind you that we will not be deterred. We will not be delayed. We will not be denied. We're here to remind you who we are. Do you know us? Have you met us? We are the ones who show up. We are the ones who fight. We are the ones who will not stop. We are the ones who show up, stand up, and fight back. We are the ones who brought reproductive rights into the forefront. We are the ones who got rid of coat hanger health care. We are the ones who got health care on the ballot. We are the ones who sent you to office, and we are the ones who will bring you home. You can't outfight us. We won't be outfought. It's in our bones, it's in our marrow. We inherited from our ancestors the fight for our freedom. Nothing for us as black women has ever been easy. We're born into hardship and hardness. We come out of the womb ready to fight. And we picked up some allies along the way who we know how to fight with us. And so we are here to promise you that we are watching, that we are waiting, and we want you to do the right thing. Pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Restoration Act. Ensure that our reproductive freedoms are safe. Ensure that our immigrant community is safe. Ensure that our environment is cared for. That's our demand on you today. And we want to tell you, again, we put you in and we'll take you out. We put you in and we'll take you out. We are depending on you to ensure that the promise of America becomes the practice of America. Now that's a hot mic. Yes. We put you in. We put you in. Yes. So now it's my honor and privilege to introduce our next group of partners to bring their remarks, representing civil rights, labor, policy, and social justice. So we will hear from Wanda Mobley, National Field Director for Black Voters Matter, Cleola Brown, National President, A. Philip Randolph Institute, Marcia Johnson Blanco, Co-Director, the Voting Rights Project for the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law, and then we have another group, and we'll call them after them. So ladies.
Good morning. My name is Wanda Mosley. I'm the National Field Director at Black Voters Matter. So first, Janice and Melanie, thank you so much for convening, for your leadership, and for inspiring and reminding us that these fights have not gone away, they continue, and we cannot sit home silent, hoping for change. We've got to get in these streets. We've got to get in these state houses. We've got to get in front of these elected officials and remind appointed officials to do their job. So here today, knowing that there's been some activity, Melanie didn't cancel this press conference because just because there's a little chatter and you might have proposed something and put something on the floor, there are no guarantees. Like Melanie said, she's been here 4 or 5 times because y'all keep playing around with our rights. And we are here today to tell you, stop. Because like Bishop said, we put you in and we'll take you out. Maybe Mr. President needs to be reminded that it was black voters in South Carolina who resurrected his candidacy. Maybe he should be reminded that he said he would, quote, fight like hell for voting rights. Well, Mr. President, I ain't seen you put on no gloves. I ain't seen you throw no punches. I ain't seen you use the power of your office to defend my right to vote. So maybe Leader Schumer needs to be reminded that it was black voters in Georgia who made him leader, who lifted him from minority to leader. So as Bishop said, sir, keep playing. We put you in and we gonna what? So, this is only my 3rd trip to D.C., Melanie. And if I'm honest, y'all, as much as I love standing in front of all these beautiful, powerful black women and allies, I really don't want to be here. I really don't. Because my right to vote is guaranteed by the Constitution, by my birth. Generations have fought for this right. My great-grandmother, Ollie Mae Charleston, born in 1911 in Ada, Oklahoma, fought for that. My grandmother, Joanne Kirkham, fought for that. And here I am, the 4th generation of my lineage is still making that same fight. But you know, I'd rather be working with our folks in working on things like climate change, trying to understand why it is that we have Cancer Alley in Louisiana, why folks are suffering because of a septic tank issue along the Panhandle in Jacksonville in Florida, why it is that a late winter storm can take one of the largest cities in the country, Houston, back to being in a third world state because they don't have clean water. So I would rather be working on those things other than something that is guaranteed to me by my birth. And yet and still, here I am. And let me also just say, while I'm here and I have this moment, and I hope these elected officials hear me, it is supremely disrespectful to hear you say, well, voting rights activists and advocates, we're going to need you to just, work a little harder, register more people to vote, get more people to the polls. What do you think we've been doing? Why do you think you have this power that you refuse to use to save the right of vote to the very people who put you in those seats? So you keep on dissing black women if you want and see what happens. You keep on dissing the reproductive rights allies and organizations and see what happens. Because we are no longer asking, we are demanding that you finish the job, that you do your job. Because again, these rights that are guaranteed to us, we should not have to fight so hard for them. But you lead us to, we're ready. We here, we stand arm in arm, allies, strong people, because as Melanie said, you won't out-organize us, you won't out-strategize us, and you will not outwork us. So you keep underestimating us, you keep disrespecting us, you keep forgetting how you got there, and you will see what happens. Thank you.
I know y'all are feeling the sun, right? Yes, Lord. My name is Cleola Brown. I'm the president of the A. Philip Randolph Institute, an arm of labor as the oldest constituent group that there is at the AFL-CIO. I'm an old lady too, but the rights that I'm here for this morning encompasses us all, no matter what the age. Amen. Now, you know they say that black women can talk without saying a word, right? If you see a look on her face that is like this, you see, yes ma'am comes right away, right? You know that there is some discontent going on. There is some discontent definitely going on right now. Who gave them the idea that they can tell us what to do with our own bodies? If that is not the epitome of disrespect, I don't know what is. As far as I know, they can't reproduce nothing. They can participate, but they can't pop out jack, okay? And I say that with all due respect to the fact that I have a son that I absolutely adore. But nobody should have the right to tell us when we should and when we shouldn't, especially if they have never had a womb of their own. So reproductive rights is our rights, but it's also their own existence. They better get a grip. They better get a grip, because as long as this face of discontent exists on the faces of black women, of white women, of brown women, of all women across this nation, they got a problem. And when they ask us, what's wrong? And we say nothing, you know it's a whole lot of something going on. Melanie Campbell, who can convene people quicker than anybody I know. Janice Mathis, who can preach harder than anybody I know, even though she's a lawyer. Leah Daughtry, who can raise a flag of fire without saying one cuss word, does it better than anybody I know. So the kind of energy that comes with pissing women off is something that you don't want to see. And then you back that mess up by talking about our right to vote is at jeopardy, or that we should be patient. Patient is not our middle name. We have been struggling, as many of the preceding speakers have said, for the right to vote in all of our cultures. Because understand that not one group of women is safe if any group of women is disenfranchised. Not one. If they come for us today, they're coming for you tomorrow. And the rights that we hold genuinely dear to our hearts is at stake. When we look at a person like John Lewis, who took the beat down on the Edmund Pettus Bridge, who talked about good trouble, and then Abiad Rustin, who said, be angelic troublemakers. The element of raising trouble is in the nature of winning what you deserve. So understand this, them of y'all who are over there, and those of you who is right back there. I'm from South Carolina. They know what I'm talking about.
Yes, say that.
Understand that the watch is on, and the look of discontent is one that is not going to last just a day or two. Our rights are forever, and we will fight you till we don't have breath in our bodies to hold on to it. So understand that, appreciate that, and know that the call for women to say enough is enough, which is the mantra, will get us together in a heartbeat. And when we're coming for those of you who are looking to take care of those of us and put us out of the game. We have young women, young girls that we are responsible for. And yes, we are our sisters' keepers. Don't get it twisted. Our voting rights, and this right here, the act that actually spells and speaks to it as it is intended, it doesn't need to be fluffed up. It's already fixed. If the House can pass it, what the heck is wrong with the Senate? Let's get it together, y'all. There is a look of discontent that is not going anywhere, and we're here as long as you can be. Thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. My name is Marcia Johnson Blanco, and I co-direct the Voting Rights Project at the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law. And I'm really honored to be here with Melanie, Janice, and all of our partners. But I'm also disheartened that we have to be here today to make this pitch. Today we are at a pivotal moment in our democracy, a moment of crisis. We are standing before the Supreme Court that has taken away pivotal rights and who we're depending on to protect the rights that we're asking Congress to return to us. Since its passage in 1965, the Voting Rights Act has transformed American democracy. American democracy began in 1965 with the Voting Rights Act, and it made it possible for all racial and ethnic minorities to have a voice in our democracy. In 2013, this court took away a vital protection of the Voting Rights Act that required states with a history of discrimination in voting to get federal review so we could stop voting discrimination in its tracks. Then in July, it made it even harder to bring vote denial and vote dilution cases under the remaining provisions of the Voting Rights Act. And states such as Georgia, Florida, Texas have stepped into the void of the protections that this court has taken away and has passed laws, are passing laws that target minority voters and make it harder to vote and taking away the voice of vulnerable voters. Today, as I stand with our partners and allies, as we continue our Summer of Democracy actions, we are asking Congress to do its job, to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, to protect women's right to reproductive justice. We need to continue the legacy of the Voting Rights Act. Many, many decades ago, this court said the right to vote is preservative of all other rights. Without the right to vote, we lose our rights along all of the issues that we care about. So it's important for us to continue fighting and asking Senate to follow up on what the House has done to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. Our democracy demands nothing less. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies. Thank you, ladies. Now we will hear from Joy Cheney, Executive Director, Senior Vice President, Policy and Advocacy for the National Urban League, Ebony Riley, DC Bureau Chief, National Action Network, Akashua Ali, President, NAACP, DC Branch, Jocelyn Fry, Senior Fellow, Center for American Progress, and Ariel Etherly, Policy Analyst, Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights. And following that group, I'll have my sister Janice Mathis come up, and we'll hear from the women who represent the women's rights, reproductive justice, LGBTQ rights, and violence prevention. Thank you.
Voting rights equal reproductive rights. 3 times. Voting rights equal reproductive rights. Voting rights equal reproductive rights. Voting rights equal reproductive rights. And no one knows it better than those who would dare to stand in our way. My name is Joy Cheney, and I am the Executive Director of the Washington Bureau and Senior Vice President for Policy and Advocacy for the National Urban League. On behalf of our 91 affiliates, 2 of which are in the state of Texas, on behalf of our 2,000 affiliate staff in 300 communities across this nation, on behalf of the nearly 2 million people we serve every year, on behalf of our young professionals, our guild, our entire Urban League movement, and all of you, I want to say respectfully, respectably, because we are the Urban League, hell no to taking our voting rights and our reproductive rights. Never before have 2 issues been so appropriately linked, and I want to thank Melanie and all of the other lead organizers for doing this rally. Hell no to the Texas legislator, the Supreme Court, a minority of members in Congress attempting to strip us of both our right to choose our elected officials and our right to choose when and how we grow our families, which ultimately determines our economic prosperity. Hell no, not after women, and in particular Black women and other women of color, saved our nation from a dangerous, treacherous, anti-democratic, autocratic force seeking to take over our government by going out in mass to vote and bringing their families and communities with them. Hell no, not after the same women saved our nation from an ongoing pandemic. We're all wearing masks here today, working on the front lines as healthcare workers and teachers, and then doing so at home for our families, sometimes 3 generations, at great cost to ourselves, emotionally, physically, and professionally. Not after we have Kamala Harris as Vice President and Nancy Pelosi as Speaker of the House, which has passed the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. Not after the Women's March, and no, I'm not even going to go on any further. It doesn't matter, not now, not ever. Will we allow anti-American cynical forces to strip us of our right to self-determination by blocking our access to the voting booth and our access to health care, which includes safe abortion care? Abortion care is health care. Conservatives used to believe in freedom and limited government intervention. Well, what happened? Now we have government being used to strip people of their right to vote and their right to private reproductive health care decisions. But we say no, we say hell no. We demand the full use of our right to choose our elected officials and our right to choose when and how to grow our families. The Constitution demands it. The National Urban League demands it. We demand it. Texas Governor Abbott and the conservative Texas state legislature have made it clear that women's rights and voting rights don't matter to them. Dozens of states across the country have made the same decision. But what they don't know is that it matters to us. They made a mistake. They awakened a beast. They will regret it. Congress, it matters to us. Supreme Court, it matters to us. I want to thank the Biden and Harris administration for their efforts to launch a legal fight on behalf of voting rights and reproductive rights. That's what we put you there for. Congress, what say you?
hell no to the women who raised you, who nurtured you, who put you in power? We need you to pass voting rights legislation, including the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. We need you to do what the Supreme Court majority did not do and use whatever means are at your disposal to reinforce a woman's right to choose and the importance of safeguarding the protections of Roe v. Wade. If not, the next time you call on women to do what needs to be done for this nation, perhaps our answer will be, hell no.
I think you've heard what we're trying to say today already, haven't you? Please give a round of applause for all the women who've already spoke. So my name is Ebony Riley, and I serve as Washington, D.C. Bureau Chief for National Action Network, which was founded in 1991 by Reverend Al Sharpton in the spirit and tradition of Dr. King to promote a modern civil rights agenda. And we condemn the attack on our community's bodily autonomy and freedom to vote. Between SB 1 and SB 8, one thing is clear. The state of Texas is determined to suppress the rights of vulnerable communities, and it's set on making it illegal to help people. And those who want to retain power want this nationwide. We're clear. The constant fear of scrutiny, surveillance, arrest, investigation, and prosecution from the government when it comes to the right to terminate a pregnancy is something no one should endure. Keep your state-sanctioned, power-consuming laws off our Black, brown, and indigenous bodies. For those barrier builders, we're on to you. We know that you've seen the census numbers and you're afraid. We know that you cannot continue to rule over us unless we're systemically disencouraged. And we say shame on those who sit on the Supreme Court and in Congress, acting as accomplices to both of reproductive and voting rights injustices. You don't get a chance to change the rules because the numbers are not in your favor anymore. We will not sit back while you begin to redraw district maps, gerrymandered behind closed doors. We have a voice in the decisions that impact our lives. National Action Network's over 100 chapters urges Congress to protect reproductive rights, as well as pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. The wait to correct this glaring injustice has been long enough. We are demanding the will of the people. We are demanding the will of the people. Get your bands off my body and keep your hands off my vote. Get your bands off my body and keep your hands off my vote. Thank you.
My name is Akoshua Ali. I'm the president of the NAACP Washington, D.C. branch. First, I'd like to thank my sister in the struggle, Melanie Campbell, who has been the visionary and has really led this fight for so long, fighting for Black women, lifting up Black women, and not lying down and not taking any struggle without a fight. So we are in a fight for our lives. Voting rights are basic human rights, like the right to breathe clean air. Voting rights are our rights. We should be ashamed that in 2021, we are having a conversation about the right to vote. These voter suppression laws that are sweeping across the nation are racist, Jim Crow era policies for over 400 years have oppressed Black and brown people in this country, but it continues today. We urge the Senate to pass the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Amendment Act and real legislation to protect all women's reproductive rights. We are watching. As a Black woman, I stand with all women's right to choose. We have the right to choose what we do with our bodies. The right to abortion care is the right to health care. Texas is only a start. If this happens in Texas, it sets precedent for what will be allowed across this country. So women everywhere should be outraged. People everywhere should be outraged. Human beings that breathe air should be outraged at what is happening in Texas, because Texas is only the start. And if it can happen in Texas, it can happen anywhere. So we stand for a woman's right to choose. Our bodies, our choice. Our bodies, our choice. It's not the government or any lawmaker's right to tell a woman her right to carry life, her right to an abortion. Get your hands off our wombs. Women have the right to decide how they live and when they want to carry life. That is their journey between them and God. It's not your place. Congress, Senate, we're talking to you. We put you in office, we'll take you out. Black women are watching. We are powerful, a powerful force that has put those that are in elected office in power. Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, our elected officials that are sitting in the White House today is off the strength of black women across this nation rising up. Respect our power. Respect our votes. Black women are watching. The NAACP is watching. With over 2,000 NAACP units across this country and over 3 million members of the NAACP across this nation, we will rise up and we are watching. We expect our senators to do your damn job. And if you don't, we are coming for you. We will vote you out of office unapologetically, without any problem, without any apprehension. We are here to hold you accountable. No justice, no peace. No justice, no peace. No justice, no peace. No voting rights, no peace. No reproductive rights, no peace. Black women will stand here. We will fight. We will ensure that you do your job. Do your job or we will vote you out. Peace and power.
Hey, ladies that come up next, we have a sharp 11 o'clock have to be off the property, so we need to make sure that we adhere to that 1 to 2 minutes. Thank you, peace and power. And now, Jocelyn Fry, Ariel Atherley, and then we'll move to our women's rights and group of sisters to speak.
Thank you, Melanie. Thank you to all the women who are here today. Thank you for your leadership. I'm Jocelyn Fry. I'm a senior fellow at the Center for American Progress, and we're proud to be here today to be supportive and in allyship and standing with and next to and behind the black women who are leading this fight for justice. And I want to focus not on one particular issue. What I want to talk about is that we are not simply in a fight for our lives, we're in a fight for our Constitution. And we should be clear about what that fight is about. Today is really a fight about whether or not we are who we say we are. You know, whether or not the promise of equal justice under law, of the right to vote, of the right to privacy and to access abortion, and of every constitutional protection, whether that promise is simply about words on a page or if they are actually values and ideals that we are committed to upholding. If even one of our constitutional rights can be ignored and dismissed with impunity, then every constitutional right is at risk. That is what is at stake. It is critical for Congress to act. We need them to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. We need them to pass the Women's Health Protection Act, the EACH Act, and every other piece of legislation to protect reproductive rights. But it's also critical for the Supreme Court to act. We are here on the steps of the Supreme Court not by accident, but because we must have a Supreme Court that is committed to upholding the Constitution and the rights of all people. Pregnant people, low-income people, black and brown people. We need a court that is unafraid to speak constitutional truth to abuses of power, whether that abuse of power is happening in Texas, whether that abuse of power is happening in Washington, D.C., whether it is being perpetrated by people who put them in, even though they shouldn't be there, whoever it is, we need the Supreme Court that feels authorized and willing to take action to uphold the rule of law. We need a Supreme Court that is capable of articulating with unflinching clarity that our constitutional rights cannot be discarded or circumvented by those who are intent upon denying us our dignity. That is what this moment is about. That is what we need. We need this a sturdy, unrelenting, steadfast leadership that is willing to uphold our Constitution. And if the Supreme Court needs any model of understanding what that leadership looks like, they just need to look out the window. right? Like these women behind you, behind me, are the women who have been standing up for leadership, relentlessly fighting on the front lines for reproductive rights, reproductive justice, for the right to vote. So that's what leadership looks like. And the last thing I want to say is, you know, a year ago, almost a year ago, we lost Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg on September 18th, and it's hard to be here and not invoke her name. But one of the things that I appreciated about her, because people talk about the fact that she was the architect of many of the rights that we are talking about, she pointed out that one of the true architects of these rights was a black woman, Pauli Murray. So whether we're talking about Justice Ginsburg or we're talking about Pauli Murray, we need to understand that those rights that they fought for are things that we cannot get up. Justice Ginsburg talked about, one of the things she said was real change, enduring change happens one step at a time. So we are here at the Supreme Court today taking one of those steps. We are fighting for real change and enduring change, and we will take as many steps as we need to get the job done. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
My name is Ariel Atherley, and I'm here with the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, a coalition of more than 220 organizations working to build an America as good as its ideals. I'm so pleased to be here with these amazing women this morning to speak out against attacks on our right to vote and attacks on our reproductive rights, including the right to access abortion. These are not new fights, as we have heard, and let us be clear, these are not separate fights. Some politicians are leading a concerted effort to control us, to minimize us, to take away our rights, but they will not win. These are fights that we have won before, they are fights that we fought to have recognized, and we can and will win again. That's why we're here today. The freedom to vote is one of our most sacred rights. It is in the language of our democracy. But some politicians want to take us backwards, and far too many biased judges are letting it happen. They are creating barriers for Black, Indigenous, young, and new Americans who want to exercise this fundamental right. They want to divide us while they block policies that we need and widely support, from pandemic relief to policing accountability, to ensuring access to comprehensive reproductive health care, including abortion. We call on Congress to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, a critically important bill that would restore the Voting Rights Act to its full strength and protect voters nationwide from discriminatory voting laws. And of course, it is essential that we call on Congress and our courts to put an end to unnecessary and offensive restrictions on abortion access. Allowing politicians and strangers to police and control our bodies disproportionately harms people of color and those living with lower incomes. Congress must also pass the Women's Health Protection Act. Our priorities are to promote the health, economic security, and well-being of our most vulnerable communities. We call on Congress to join us, to work for the people, to listen to Black women when we tell you we need to get to work. Our elected leaders must protect our freedom to vote and advance reproductive health, rights, and justice. People in America deserve no less. Thank you.
Great job. We are truly inspired today. We have another round of excellent women advocates and speakers, beginning with Marcella Howell, founder and president in Our Own Voice, National Black Women's Reproductive Justice Agenda, Yvonne Sue, Chief Policy and Government Affairs Officer, National Asian Pacific American Women's Forum, Kenitra Seeley, Black Women's Health Imperative, and we will come back with our final speakers after that. Ladies.
Somebody back there clapping for me. Thank you, Jocelyn. Thank you. My name is Marcella Howell. I am the president of In Our Own Voice, National Black Women's Reproductive Justice Agenda. And I want to thank Melanie and everyone else who helped pull us together. And that was no small feat in the area of COVID. You know, in June, when Republican senators blocked the passage of the For the People Act, my first response was, what are they afraid of? And then I realized that the answer was right in front of me, us. They're afraid of all these Black women you see standing behind me. They are afraid of black women because they are afraid of our votes. When black women come together, we change the world. We push the envelope. We rule the future. Look at 2018. We changed the U.S. House of Representatives. Look at 2020. We changed the White House. And look at 2021 in Georgia. We changed the U.S. Senate. Our polling told us that black women decided they needed to vote in 2020 because the stakes were too high not to. And that should be a sign to the U.S. Senate that we mean business. As the head of a black women's reproductive justice organization, I know that voting rights is a reproductive justice issue. I know that abortion access is a reproductive justice issue. And I know that black women are the single most progressive voters in this country. And I know that our collective voices, our collective votes, equal power to make change. If our vote didn't matter, conservatives wouldn't be trying so hard to take it away from us. Our job today is to demand that the U.S. Senate pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. We need to protect the right to vote for everyone in this country. So to the senators, I say this: no more hesitation, no more explanations, and no more excuses. We trust the voices of black women. We collectively will vote you out, as you have heard. Trust our voices and understand our collective power. We hold the future of your office in our hands, and black women, as I said, will rule the future. Thank you. And I'm a voter, so be clear.
Thank you, Marcella. I'm Yvonne Su, the Chief Policy and Government Affairs Officer for the National Asian Pacific American Women's Forum. As the only national organization dedicated to empowering Asian American women and protecting our rights, NAPAWF is proud to stand in solidarity with black women and demand our freedom to vote and make decisions about our own bodies. When it comes to elections, women of color matter. Women of color make up more than 20% of the population, and by 2050, we will make up the majority of women in our country. We all have the right to vote and have equal access to make our voices heard. We have been silenced for far too long. Asian American and Pacific Islander women are tired of attempts to take away the hard-fought right to vote. We are tired of attempts to control our bodies. We are angry and demand an end to the long-standing efforts to restrict reproductive and abortion access. Congress needs to protect our rights, abortion rights, as so many of those who came and spoke before me said, is voting rights, and voting rights is abortion rights. We need the For the People Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Act now. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Kenita Seeley, and I'm Policy Counsel at the Black Women's Health Imperative. Thank you for inviting the Black Women's Health Imperative to speak truth to power during this unprecedented time where voting rights and reproductive justice are in jeopardy for millions of Americans. Black women continue to live at the intersection of racial and gender oppression and economic and health adversity. Today, with less protections when it comes to voting access and a Texas law that prohibits abortions before many women even realize that they're pregnant, truly exemplifies that our constitutional right to vote, along with our health and well-being, is in the crosshairs. Despite these harrowing realities, I stand here emboldened. Black women are beautiful, intelligent, powerful, dedicated, and determined. It is clear we continue to be the 2020 election's most valuable voting bloc. Because of the success of Black women on the front lines of elections, we turned states like Georgia blue. Now they want to suppress our voice and our reproductive rights? No, we cannot allow that. So the time is now. The time is now for Senate to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, H.R. 4, so the federal government has oversight to ensure that the states do not pass discriminatory voting laws. The time is now for the Senate to pass the Women's Health Protection Act, a reproductive rights bill, which would establish the legal right to abortion nationwide and prevent states from placing unnecessary medical restrictions on the procedure, ultimately swiftly protecting the reproductive rights for women and all people. The time is now to stand in solidarity and act. Today, I urge and call on all of you to participate in a call to action by calling your U.S. senators and demand they pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act and the Women's Health Protection Act. The time is now to protect our democracy, voting rights, and reproductive rights. The time is now. Thank you.
As now we move into our final round of presenters and advocates, we want to call on Ellie Smeal, President of the Feminist Majority, Joteka Edie, Convener, Win with Black Women, Jennifer Tucker, Senior Policy Advisor of the ERA Coalition. And now. ERA Coalition and now.
Hi, I'm Ellie Sewell, President of the Feminist Majority, and I'm very proud to stand here with my Black women sisters and to be an ally in this great struggle. We've been at this a long time. We know what's going on, and we demand that they change the filibuster, and frankly, we want it to end. It is just an excuse to defeat progressive legislation, and we need voting rights acts. We need two voting rights acts. We need the John Lewis Act. We need the act that will, we think, replace the first one, H.R. 1, but we need a expansive voting rights acts so that we do not limit the right to vote, as the Republican legislatures have been spreading these ridiculous bills to cut voting rights everywhere. Secondly, we definitely need women's health protection. And Texas not only passed a vigilante act for voting rights, giving powers to so-called partisan poll watchers, and they can carry guns. They can enforce the act. I don't know what it means that they can carry guns right into the voting booth. Talk about intimidation. Talk about it takes you to beyond the 60s. And basically, we need to also fight for equality each inch of the way, and we must, in that carve-out, have a carve-out for the Equal Rights Amendment, because the Senate must remove the timeline. We have done everything. We have fought for over 100 years, for God's sakes, and we know where we stand in voting rights, in the right to choose an abortion, or for complete comprehensive reproductive health care, and for the Equal Rights Amendment. We are the overwhelming majority of this country, and we deserve a vote on the floor of the Senate, and we need a carve-out if that's what's necessary. But frankly, I would like to just see the filibuster rule go. But if not the whole thing, at least a carve-out for voting rights, a carve-out to protect reproductive rights. To think that we have a bill that can be enforced by vigilantes in our second largest state that are so outrageous. No exception for rape, no exception for incest. And we demand it for the Equal Rights Amendment. So for all of these reasons, our constitutional rights deserve it. And we are going to fight, fight, fight to change the filibuster, because it's only, they want to call it Jim Crow, it's Jim Crow, Jane Crow, it's, you know what it is. It's a way for politicians to say they're with you, but we have this procedural problem. Clear the procedural problems, do what's necessary in the 21st century. And as one of our speakers just said, get on with it. We've got to do something about the climate. We've got to do something about guns. We have to be the greatest democracy in the world, and it cannot leave us behind. We demand progress, and we demand it now.
Well, good morning. My name is Joteka Edie, and I'm the convener of Win with Black Women, a network of Black women committed to ensuring that we stand up for Black women in the communities that we serve. I won't be long this morning because what needs to be said has been said by my sisters standing in solidarity. It is important that we remain steadfast, that we remain consistent, that we remain bold and loud in echoing that we shall not be moved. We shall not be moved. I am a child of South Carolina, born to an ancestors who fought for the right to vote, born to ancestors who tilled the land, born to those who worked when they did not want to, but they persevered. And in me, they instilled a fight, a legacy of which I stand on today, that I shall not be moved. We know what is happening today. There's a song that I used to love when I was back in college. It was sung by a woman from North Carolina named Sunshine Simpson, I believe that's her name. And the way the song went was, I heard it all before. I've seen this before. All of your lies and all of your tricks, I've seen it all before. And just like Jim Crow has reinvented himself and herself to be Jim Crow Esquire in this day and time, we've seen it all before. We've heard it all before. We have seen since the dawn of time an aggressive attack on our God-given right to vote, our fundamental freedom. Ever since 1965, they have been trying to cut back our voting rights. We saw this in 2010 and 2011 when there was an aggressive attack on voting rights and the onslaught of photo ID, attacks to voter registration, and you name it, and the list goes on. We saw it when the 9 bodies sitting in this building behind us put forth a very dangerous opinion in Shelby County versus Holder that then unleashed unprecedented massive attacks on the voting rights in local communities, places like I grew up, in rural places in South Carolina and Georgia and Alabama and Texas and Florida, and the states go on and on and on, where they are taking polling places and moving them from HBCU campuses and into places where we know our people won't go. Local people who have empowered themselves to try to take out voting rights. And some people say, well, what matters when they take away 100 votes here and 50 votes here? Well, it matters because we saw in Georgia what the margin is, and that's what they know. But I am here to tell you, just like the sister's shirt says, you can play all the games you want. We've seen it before. You can try to change the rules. We've seen it before. Because organized people will beat organized money all day, every day. And I dare tell you, organized Black women and their allies, we will beat trickery and games every single day. Because yet still, we march. Still, we fight. And still, we will vote. Don't let up. Let's pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. Let's fix the mess that this court put in. And we call on every single member of Congress that stands there. I know you can hear my voice. Just as you were reminded by our good bishop this morning, you know what? We can take you out. We put you in. We can take you out. Stand up, keep fighting, and don't give up.
Good morning, good morning, good morning. Woo! Thank you, Melanie and Janice, for your vision and leadership this long, hot summer on voting rights. And now lending your networks to ensure that the important voices are heard on the critical issue of reproductive justice. Thank you. I'm Jennifer Tucker. I think this is working.
Yeah, but you need to speak into it.
Okay.
Yeah, there you go.
I'm Jennifer Tucker, and I'm with the ERA Coalition, and I'm here this morning representing Carol Jenkins, the President and CEO of the ERA Coalition and the Fund for Women's Equality. Carol is traveling today, but I know she would rather be here. Our goal at the ERA Coalition is to amend the Constitution, that's all, to ensure that no one is discriminated against on the basis of sex. The ERA Coalition is comprised of some 200 national and local partner and supporting organizations across the country representing millions. And recent polling shows that 80% of Americans agree. The ERA, or the Equal Rights Amendment, is a direct descendant of a struggle for voting rights. And thank goodness we've evolved to a place today where the standard is equal access to the ballot box, regardless of race, ethnicity, geography, income. But some people seem to have forgotten that, but we're here to remind them that there is a standard. Sadly, as we stand here today, our Capitol security forces are on high alert. Our democracy is under siege because a radical minority is afraid that the nation's changing demographic will end the entitlement that they've come to expect. But that's not happening on our watch. The ERA is not limited to any one issue. It's a broader and intersectional equality that we envision. Legislators across the country understand that. That's why they voted in favor of ratification and always included legislators who hold a range of personal opinions, including respecting reproductive justice, educational equity, LGBTQ+ status, voting rights, fair employment, and more. At the ERA Coalition, we fully understand that equality comes when the principles of reproductive justice guide our policy making. We will prevail on voting rights, on reproductive justice, and on the ERA. We call on the Senate to enact the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, to pass SJ1, which removes the time limit and allows the ERA to enter the Constitution. And we call on this Senate to respect a woman's right to bodily autonomy. We will prevail. Onward.
And now for our final speaker, last but certainly not least, Christian Nunez, President of the National Organization for Women. Welcome her.
Thank you very much. It is a pleasure to be here with such amazing Black women leaders and allies. I just want to take a quick few seconds to just speak and just reiterate everything we've heard today. We are here first because we know the power of Black women, right? We know that our democracy is where democracy is leading, and our democracy has been held on because of the power of Black women and the vote of the Black women. So what we have to continue to do is support Black women, and we have to protect Black women in that process. And we have to protect women as a whole in that process. As someone clearly said earlier, when they come for one, they will come for all. So as we're fighting here today, we are not only fighting for voting rights, we're not only fighting for reproductive rights, we're fighting for the racial justice, economic justice, because all of these things are so intersectionally intertwined. And it's super important that we understand that we must work together in solidarity in order to make this change happen. So as I stand here, I just ask you all to come with us together as we ask and we hold and continue to put pressure on our Senate that we pass the John Rawlings Voter Act, and we pass and we end the filibuster, and we repeal the Hyde Amendment, we remove the deadline in the ERA, and we are also helping make sure that the Freedom for the Vote Act is also passed. So I just want to thank you all for your time, and thank you for giving me a few seconds to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Can we give our sister Janice Mathis a round of applause and thank her for your leadership, my sister? Absolutely. We want to call on, that's it. So, thank you all so very much for joining us for this Black Women and Allies call to action for voting rights and reproductive justice. Because truly, voting rights are paramount for us to have reproductive rights. So thank you to all of our partners, those here and those who are watching. And call your U.S. Senator today and tell them to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act and to protect our reproductive rights at 202-224-3121. 202-224-3121. Those of y'all who are watching, you are the power that we need to make sure that they do the right thing. Because if they don't, what do we say? We put you in, and take you out. Thank you. God bless and have a good day.
All right. Okay.